Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take complex global research, boil down, and really help you understand the big forces shaping our world.
Yeah, and today we're tackling something huge,
Hmm.
biological invasions. It's one of the biggest threats to biodiversity out there.
And we're zeroing in on the human side of it, the socioeconomic, political stuff that drives this crisis. Our mission today, to unpack a really important paper.
That's right. It's called Capacity of Countries to Reduce Biological Invasions, led by Latombe. It's a fantastic piece of work because it takes this global view.
A really quantitative view, right? Trying to measure what actually makes a difference.
Exactly. They're looking beyond just local ecology to understand the underlying human capacity to deal with this problem.
So they used 5 big country-level indicators: governance, trade, environmental performance, lifestyle and education, and innovation. And used these to look at 2 main things. First, what explains how many established alien species EAS a country has across like 8 different groups of organisms?
Right. Plants, ants, mammals,
Right.
fish,
Yeah.
the whole lot.
And second, what explains a country's ability both proactively, like prevention, and reactively, like managing existing problems, to actually handle these invasions?
And the why this matters part is, well, it's pretty stark, isn't it? These EAS are basically a footprint of human global change.
A leading cause of biodiversity loss, yeah.
And even though we've had all this new legislation since the 90s trying to tackle biosecurity,
The numbers are still going up.
still going up globally. No sign of slowing down or saturating. It's actually quite alarming.
Which suggests maybe the policies themselves aren't the whole story, or perhaps they're not enough against, well, against bigger forces.
Precisely, and that's why understanding these broader drivers is so critical. Our big global biodiversity plans, they often miss this piece.
They focus on the biology maybe, but not the human systems causing the problem.
Exactly. You can't really protect nature long term if you don't get a handle on the human machinery that's, frankly, accelerating the damage.
Okay, so this study was massive in scope. 125 countries, right? All continents.
Yeah, really comprehensive. And using those 5 big indices because, well, they argue these factors influence the entire invasion process.
From the moment a species gets introduced.
Right, through to whether it establishes, how it spreads, and then how or if we manage it. It covers the whole life cycle.
Okay, let's unpack these indices a bit. They sound broad, so what are they actually measuring? Let's start with maybe the most obvious one: trade.
Yeah, trade is kind of the engine here. They measured it by the total value of imports, goods, and services. It's basically a proxy for, well, propagal pressure.
Propagal pressure meaning just the sheer number of opportunities for species to arrive.
Exactly. Think stowaways in shipping containers, things hiding in imported plants or soil. More trade just means more stuff moving around, and inevitably more species moving with it. It directly drives introductions.
Makes sense. More connections, more hitchhikers. Okay, what about governance? That sounds like it should be the brake on that trade-driven introduction.
It should be, ideally. Governance here represents a country's ability to actually make and enforce good policies. They measure it using things like rule of law, government effectiveness, control of corruption.
So it's not just having laws on the books, but whether they actually work, whether they're enforced without corruption.
Precisely. Weak governance means maybe border checks get ignored or laws are just symbolic. It's about the political reality is biosecurity actually a priority that gets implemented effectively.
Got it. So governance is about the effectiveness of the rules. Then there's the environment itself, environmental performance, or EPI.
Right. UPI reflects the overall health of a country's environment, ecosystem vitality, land use patterns, pollution levels,
And why does that matter for invasions?
because it influences establishment. If a country's native ecosystems are already stressed, fragmented, maybe polluted, basically,
Yeah.
if it has a low EPI score, then it's much easier for an alien species to get a foothold.
So a degraded environment has less resistance, less competition for the newcomer.
Exactly. It's like leaving the door wide open for invaders. Healthy ecosystems are more resilient.
That makes intuitive sense. Okay, the fourth one, lifestyle and education. This one feels a bit different, linking culture and awareness to species spread.
It really is quite novel in this context. This index pulls together factors like education levels, access to information, even cultural globalization. It's trying to capture public values, awareness, how connected people are to these issues.
So how does that connect to invasions?
Well, think about it. If people are highly educated about environmental risks, Maybe they're less likely to, say, release pets into the wild or accidentally carry seeds on their hiking boots.
Or maybe they're more likely to support strong environmental policies or report seeing a new weird plant.
Exactly that. It connects individual and societal behavior, awareness, and values directly to the invasion pathway.
Interesting. And the last one, innovation. How does tech fit in?
Innovation is about the tools. Measured by the Global Innovation Index, it represents a country's technological capacity, the means to detect new invasions early, prevent their spread, or manage the ones already there.
So like advanced genetic tools at the
Yeah.
border, or maybe sophisticated mapping and eradication tech?
Yeah, exactly. DNA sequencing, remote sensing, drones for monitoring or targeted control, all that stuff falls under innovation. It's the technological toolkit for biosecurity.
Okay, that gives us a good feel for the inputs. Now, before we jump into the results, you mentioned something about methodology using historical data back to 1996. Why was that so important?
Oh, absolutely crucial. They specifically used older data, around 1996 or averaged up to 2015, for governance and trade. This was to capture what they call invasion debt.
Invasion debt, meaning the consequences of past actions.
Precisely. Biological invasions take time. There's often a really long lag, decades, sometimes between a species arriving and it actually becoming established and widespread enough to be counted.
Ah, so the number of invasive species we see today might be a result of trade patterns or governance levels from 20 years ago.
Exactly. The conditions back then set the stage for what we're seeing now. You absolutely need that historical perspective to understand the current picture. It reveals the long-term legacy.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Right, let's get to the findings. When they crunched the numbers, correlating these indices with how many established alien species countries had, which factor came out on top? The heavyweight.
Overwhelmingly, it was trade.
Really? That's strong.
Yeah, trade was the best single predictor for the total number of EAS, and also for most of the specific groups. They looked at plants, fish, birds, spiders, amphibians, reptiles.
Wow.
And the relationship was pretty stark. As trade volume went up, EAS richness just kept increasing, sometimes even accelerating. It's basically more globalization equals more invasions, full stop.
Okay, so trade is the big engine driving introductions. But here's where you said it gets really complex. Governance. It wasn't linear like trade, was it? Tell us about this governance paradox.
Right, this was maybe one of the most fascinating findings. For most types of species, the link between governance and the number of alien species wasn't straightforward. It was often quadratic or even cubic, meaning that governance only seemed to limit invasions when it reached very high levels. At low or even medium levels of governance, it had little effect, or sometimes the correlation was actually slightly positive or neutral.
Wait, positive. So having some basic governance might actually correlate with more species, not fewer. How does that work?
Well, think about it this way. Basic governance might coincide with the early stages of economic development, which increases trade and movement.
Ah, so the governance isn't strong enough yet to counteract the invasion risk that comes with that economic activity.
Exactly. It might look like you have rules, maybe a basic border check, but it's not nearly enough to handle the sheer volume of introductions fueled by growing trade. It's like putting up a flimsy fence against a flood.
It might even signal that the pathway is open but not well policed.
Could be. The point is, you only start seeing a reduction in invasion levels when governance becomes really strong, really effective, with low corruption and high rule of law, essentially, when you build a proper seawall, not just a sandbag.
So the implication is pretty significant, especially for developing countries. Just making small improvements in governance might not cut it for biosecurity. They need a major leap.
That's what the data suggests. You need to get past that critical threshold where governance is robust enough to actually implement effective biosecurity measures that can genuinely counteract the pressure from trade.
That's a really important nuance. Okay, what about the other factors? Trade dominated, but lifestyle and education popped up as important for specific groups.
Yeah, that was interesting too. Lifestyle and education turned out to be the best single predictor specifically for ants and mammals.
Ants and mammals, why those?
Well, think about how those often spread. Ants can hitchhike with domestic trade, pot plants, things like that. Mammal invasions are often linked to the pet trade, intentional introductions for hunting, or escapes from farms or homes.
Ah, so things more directly related to personal choices, hobbies, public behavior.
Exactly. And that's where lifestyle and education comes in. A more aware, educated public might be less likely to engage in those high-risk activities or might support stricter regulations on them. It shows that public awareness and values really do matter.
It's not just about government policy at the border, it's also about what people do in their daily lives.
Precisely. It highlights that often overlooked social dimension.
Okay, so that's predicting the number of invaders. What about predicting a country's capacity to manage them? They looked at proactive and reactive capacity separately, right?
Yes. Proactive capacity is about prevention, stopping species arriving or establishing in the first place. Reactive is dealing with the ones already here, mitigating damage.
And what predicted proactive capacity?
Governance came out strongest there. Which makes sense, right?
Hmm.
Preventing introductions requires strong political will, effective border controls, solid quarantine systems, all things tied to good governance.
Okay, that fits. And reactive capacity dealing with existing problems.
That's where lifestyle and education came back strongly. It was the best predictor for reactive capacity.
Why would that be?
Well, managing established invaders often requires public cooperation, community involvement, maybe citizen science reporting, support for control programs. If the public understands the issue and is willing to participate, which links back to education and awareness, then the reactive measures are much more likely to succeed.
So governance for prevention, lifestyle education for mitigation? Interesting. And did that historical invasion debt idea show up here too with capacity?
It absolutely did.
Yeah.
For proactive capacity, the average governance level from 1996 to 2015 was actually a better predictor of current capacity than the most recent governance data from 2015.
Wow. So it really reinforces that effective biosecurity isn't built overnight.
Exactly. It relies on sustained, stable, effective government and policy investment over decades. You can't just flip a switch. You need that long-term resilience. Short-term political changes might not be enough.
This all paints a picture of these deep, long-term forces at play, which leads us to probably the most alarming part of the study, looking at how these factors are changing over time. They mapped countries in a socioeconomic space using
Governance and trade, because those emerged as the two most dominant factors overall. They plotted countries based on their levels for both.
and found distinct clusters, I imagine.
Yeah, clear groups. You had countries with high governance and high trade things. EU nations, US, Australia, New Zealand, up in the top right. And the countries with low governance and low trade, many African nations, for example, in the bottom left, and others in between, of course.
Okay, so that's the snapshot. Now, the trajectories. How did things change between 1996 and 2018? Let's start with trade.
Trade showed a universal trend. Every single one of the 125 countries saw an increase in trade volume over that period.
Every single one.
Every single one.
Yeah.
So tropical pressure, the sheer number of potential introductions is going up absolutely everywhere. That's the constant rising tide.
Okay, that's the accelerator pedal, firmly pressed down globally. Now, what about the brake? Governance. Did that rise everywhere, too, to compensate?
No. And this is really the crux of the problem, the potential future crisis. Governance trends were much more mixed, heterogeneous.
How so?
Well, some regions, parts of Asia and Africa, actually saw improvements in their governance scores over that time.
Okay, that's a positive.
But the highly developed regions, the ones already in that high trade category, the ones theoretically best equipped to handle invasions,
What happened there?
their governance levels either stagnated or actually decreased after the early 2000s.
Decreased. In places like...
Well, the study specifically highlighted North America. Its overall governance score in 2018 was found to be lower than it was back in 1996.
Wow. Okay, let that sink in. The regions facing the highest invasion pressure because of massive trade are seeing the very factor needed to manage that pressure, high-level governance, actually weaken or stall.
That's exactly what the data suggests. It's
Yeah.
a deeply concerning trend.
So if trade is universally rising, pushing more species introductions,
Yeah.
and the primary defense mechanism, effective governance, is weakening or not keeping pace in the very places that need it most.
Then we're likely setting ourselves up for a major worsening of the problem in the coming decades. The invasion debt we're accumulating now could be enormous.
The protective systems are eroding just as the threat level ramps up.
That's the worry, yeah.
Okay, before we wrap this deep dive, we should touch on limitations. No single study can capture everything, right?
Absolutely. The main thing to remember is this is correlational. It shows incredibly strong links between these indices and invasion outcomes, but it doesn't definitively prove cause and effect in a mechanistic way.
So we know that high governance is linked to fewer invasions, but maybe not precisely which specific policies within that governance structure are doing the heavy lifting.
Exactly. Future work needs to dig into those mechanisms. Which types of border control, which regulations, which enforcement strategies are most effective. Same for innovation. which technologies offer the best return on investment for biosecurity.
And they also mention data gaps, particularly historical data
For lifestyle education and innovation, they only had recent data for those, so understanding the full-time lag associated with public awareness or technological capacity is still a bit fuzzy. We know there's a lag, but maybe not its exact length for those factors.
Got it. So pulling it all together, what's the big takeaway message here for how we think about biodiversity, about global policy?
I think the fundamental message is that biological invasions aren't just an ecology problem to be handled by conservationists alone. They are deeply intertwined with global trade, economics, politics, and society.
They need to be central to those broader discussions.
Absolutely. You can't plan for sustainable development or robust global trade without explicitly accounting for and managing the invasion risk that comes with it.
And the study suggests that managing that risk requires, well, a serious commitment.
A huge commitment. Basically, if global trade keeps accelerating, and all signs suggest it will affers, then countries need massive, sustained improvements in governance just to keep the invasion problem from getting worse. We need to significantly raise the bar on biosecurity effectiveness worldwide.
Just to hold the line, essentially.
Just to hold the line against the rising tide.
Which brings us to that final provocative thought, circling back to that governance paradox. We know only high levels of governance really seem to put a dent in invasions, but we're seeing that capacity stagnate or even erode in some of the most developed high-trade nations. So the question becomes, how much decline can we tolerate?
Right. Is there a tipping point, a level where governance effectiveness drops just enough that the sheer relentless pressure from global trade simply overwhelms our defenses?
And the accumulated invasion debt from years of weakening policy suddenly comes due, potentially making control impossible or astronomically expensive.
That's the cliff edge we potentially face. Are we eroding our defenses past the point of no return? It's a critical question.
A really critical question indeed. This has been a fascinating, if slightly sobering, deep dive. Thanks for walking us through this research.
My pleasure. It's complex stuff, but the implications are incredibly important. Policy, sustained effort, public awareness, they all matter immensely.
They certainly do. And thank you all for listening. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.